Okay, welcome to another video. So what we're going to be doing today is taking a look at an openSUSE based distribution called GeckoLinux. So GeckoLinux aims to be a more user-friendly and polished out-of-the-box experience than standard openSUSE. We've checked it out on the channel once before, however since then there's been quite a few changes to the rolling release which should make it for quite an interesting update. So GeckoLinux is pleased to announce updates to its complete lineup of rolling spins. They're proudly built with unmodified openSUSE Tumbleweed and Pacman packages from their own project's own repositories. This release offers several quality of life improvements for GeckoLinux rolling users. The default file system for the various Calamares guided installation options is now BTRFS with transparent ZSTD data compression, which is definitely something I'm excited to check out. Of course, all other modern Linux file systems are still supported via the custom partitioning option. Additionally, zRAM swap is enabled out of the box, and the early out of memory daemon is also enabled to help prevent unrecoverable system freezes in low memory situations. For users of new Ryzen hardware, the AMD GPU driver is included out of the box, and there are improvements to the language installer script to make it more reliable and compatible with future package updates. So all of their desktops have been updated, so GNOME is now version 40, Cinnamon is 4.8.6, Plasma is 5.21.5, Budgie is 10.5.3, LXQT is 0.17, XFCE is 4.16 and Mate is 1.24. And then for Pantheon it's got different component versions. And we're going to be using the most recently updated ISO due to an incompatibility between the openSUSE adaptation of Grub2 on legacy BIOS in the previous version. And the desktop we're going to be taking a look at today is their GeckoLinux Rolling Plasma Edition, which has an ISO size of around about 1.5 GB. With that being said, let's get into the live environment and get this installed. And here we are. So as per usual, we're going to be installing this natively, but for those of you who like to skip the installation parts of these videos, there'll be a timestamp down below which will take you straight to the installed desktop. So the first step we need to do is choose our language, which for me is British English and is always one below, and next. So for the time zone, Europe London is all good. And English UK is my keyboard layer, and we'll just use this box just beneath it to make sure it's all working as it should before we go to the next step. So now we can start to partition our drives, and of course it's now using the new default file system of BTRFS. So we're going to go straight for an erase disk, and it does give you some options to configure your swap. So we can go no swap, swap no hibernate, swap with hibernate, or we can do without any partitions at all and swap to a file. I'm going to use swap with hibernate, and I remember it being a bit of an issue last time I checked out GeckoLinux. It did work eventually, but it took us a little while to get there. So hopefully it's a bit better this time around. So we're going to go swap with hibernate, and then that's of course going to give us 3 partitions. One for our swap partition, or one for our EFI partition, and then the rest is all assigned to our root partition using BTRFS. Next. So user account time. We're just going to call this one a Gecko Boy. Type in our password. And I'm going to log in automatically and use the same password for the administrator account. Next. Okay, so that's everything. We can have a quick look at the summary to make sure it's all good, and then we can commit to our install. So I'll pause the video here and come back once it's finished. So the installation has complete, and that took no time at all, completing in just a couple of minutes on my machine. So we're now going to reboot and check out our fresh installed GeckoLinux with KDE Plasma. And here we are, freshly installed and at the desktop. So the default graphics platform we are going to be using on GeckoLinux is X11. So what we're going to do now is quickly see if there's any updates to get, and then we'll start taking a look around. Okay, so we've just run the zipper update command in the terminal, and as we can see there's quite a lot that we're going to need to update, with a total of 1,521 packages with a total download size of 1.37 GB. Now before we commit to that update, we're just going to scroll all the way up, and then you can see the additional repositories that GeckoLinux comes with. So we have Google Chrome, we have Google Talk plugin and NVIDIA, Pacman, which will make it easier playing different media codecs out of the box, and then of course the Tumbleweed repositories as well as Skype Stable. So I'm just going to apply these updates and I'll come back once they're finished. Okay, so we're all up to date and should be good to go. So I also done a restart, but just before that I installed HTOP and NeoFetch so we can see how much RAM we're using on a fresh boot. And as you can see there, it's not super light, but it's not too heavy either for a full-fledged KDE desktop distribution at just under 800 MB at 795. And then just beneath that, we can see our rather large swap partition, which says 65.7 GB. Now, if we queue that and then go into LSBLK, you can see that we have the zRAM configured here as well. Now, while we've got our terminal open, let's quickly open up NeoFetch and see what that says as well. So for packages, we have got 1,624 native RPM packages. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's start taking a look at their implementation of KDE. So it's quite a clean setup there with just a single panel at the bottom. Now it doesn't use the icons only task manager, it's got the more old traditional style of the task manager. So if we was to open up a Dolphin from our quick launch applications, we can see we've got the full title there. So what we're going to do is go to Show Alternatives and switch it over to the icons only task manager. Okay, so that's moved a few things around, so let's just see if we can sort that out. So I think that's a quick launch, so I'm going to unpin that. And I'm going to unpin that one. And now we're going to leave the expose there, but we're also going to remove these little quick launches as well by going into Edit Panel and Remove. And we're going to do the same for Dolphin. And then we should have a bit more of a cleaner panel at the bottom of our screen now. Okay. So as far as the actual application launcher, it doesn't use the sort of more standard KDE one. So if we go onto a right click and go to Show Alternatives, we can see that it's using the application menu, but it's also got the full screen application dashboard, or we can have the newer sort of application menu for KDE, like so, which gives you your application categories to your left with a few options here down the bottom. Now I'm going to leave it on that one for now, and let's keep moving. Now on the right side of our screen, we of course have our date and time, and then we have our sort of system tray for network and all of that good stuff. Now as far as applications go, I don't think it comes installed with a great deal, so we'll have a quick look and see exactly what we've got installed out of the box and see what media applications we've got, and then we'll test out of a quick media test, and then we'll check out how all of the snapshots are set up out of the box. So in graphics we have GwenView, which is KDE's image viewer, Color Paint, which is a paint program, LibreOffice Draw, Ocular and Scanlight. Now in internet, Firefox is going to be your default web browser, KTorrent is going to be your BitTorrent client, and then we have Pigeon, which is a multi-protocol chat application, and then we have Thunderbird as our default desktop email client. Now in multimedia, we have Clementine, which is a music player, and then for everything else we have VLC Media Player. So along with that, and we've got the Pacman repos, we should have no issues playing any media out of the box, but we'll test that out in just a moment. Office-wise, it appears to have the full LibreOffice suite, so let's quickly open up LibreOffice Writer and see if that's all set up with auto spell checking out of the box as well. So we've got the nice openSUSE loading screen there, so let's close this off for the moment. I'm going to go straight into Tools and just check that it is enabled, so we have automatic spell checking. So if we just type a few characters, as you can see there, it's got a dictionary for me ready to go, so it's going to automatically check your spelling as you go. So let's close that and keep it moving. So that's pretty much everything in Office. Now in settings, we have SAX3 system settings for KDE, which we'll go through in a moment just to see what's been changed in this installation. And then we have YAST, yet another setup tool, which again we'll go through as well. Now in system, we have Arc archiving tool. Our default file manager is Dolphin. We have gparted to manage disk partitions, HP device viewer, info center, kfind, console is of course our terminal emulator on KDE. System monitor, and again we have YAST and then YAST software. Now in utilities we have Arc, Kcalc, Kfind, SAX3 and Spectacle for screenshots. And of course if you was to search for YAST in your application launcher, it will then show you all of the different modules that it includes, and we'll go through some of these in just a moment. So I think what we'll do now is a quick media playback test. So I've just downloaded quickly a video off my own YouTube channel so we can test it out with media playback. So when you open up Dolphin, by default it's going to be in the details view, which will give you your name of your folders, size and then the date it was modified. So we're going to go straight into downloads and just quickly double click on this Manjaro video with Cutefish that we did not too long ago and see if that works by just double clicking, and then of course it's going to open up in our default media player of VLC, which is all working absolutely fine. So let's close that off now, and what we're going to do is jump straight into the system settings and see what they have changed on this system, and then we'll start checking some things out in YAST. So using KRunner, we're going to go and type in system settings, and let's see what changes they have made by highlighting the changes from this little setting at the bottom right here. Right, so we've got some changes in appearance. Let's jump straight into it. So far as the application style and the global theme here, nothing really appears to have changed. It comes with Breeze, Breeze Dark and Breeze Twilight. And now for the application style, again, it's using Breeze. And if we go into the Plasma style itself, it does have a change. and it's using Numix. And I can also see that we are using a different window decoration, but I don't think that's Numix. We'll check that out in just a moment. Color wise, again, we're using Numix for the colors. And now in Windows decoration, oh, we've got a crash and we are back. So I'm not too sure why that crashed there, but we should be all good to go. So we're back in Windows decorations, and the theme it's using for its Windows decorations is actually plastic, which isn't one that I've used too much. So this is all of this action up right here with your title bar action buttons like close and maximize and minimize, which is kind of giving me a Windows kind of vibe there. Now fonts and font rendering is something that GeckoLinux prides itself on. The actual font that we are using is pretty much system-wide Ubuntu, which is interesting. And then for splash screen, the only change here is that it's not using any. So it'll feel like you're getting straight into your desktop as quick as possible. Now if we go into workspace behavior, let's see what they've got changed here. There we go, perfect. So as we can see, single clicking on a folder inside your file manager of Dolphin will select it instead of opening it. So the default sort of action will be you click it once and it will select that folder as opposed to going into it, emulating kind of like a double click. Now we have a change in screen lock-in. So all I can see here is that it's not locking the screen automatically. It's just going to do it after waking from sleep. And that is all of the changes there in workspace behavior. So we've got some changes in the shortcut keys. We're not going to go through all of these, but it's changed some of the default shortcuts for your keyboard shortcuts as well. And now we have start up and shut down. So the theming it's going to be using for your SDDM login screen is going to be using Breeze for openSUSE. And background services wise, there's going to be some changes here as well. So there's quite a bit running there as we can see. And then the desktop session is going to start with an empty session every time you shut down, reboot, etc. Instead of sort of repopulating the screen with applications that were there when you initiated your sort of close and all of that good stuff, which is how it should be for me anyway. I like to start with a clean desktop when I start up my computer. So we've got any other changes here. So we have some changes to the search, and then we also have some changes to the applications, which is just going to be the launch feedback. And is there anything else? No. So I think what we're going to do now is jump into it with Yast and see how it's set up with the snapshots for BTRFS and just see how we go. So going into our application launcher, we're just going to type in snap, and then as you can see we have Yast file system snapshots. Just go ahead and open that and see if that's all configured to work for us out of the box. Okay, it isn't, so we've got an error here. So no snapper configuration exists. You have to create one or more configuration tools to use Yast to snapper. The snapper command line tool can be used to create configurations. It's interesting that they've not configured that out of the box. So we're going to try a couple of things. I'm also going to see if time shift is configured as well, but we're going to create a config for Yast as well for snapper to see if we can get it all to work. So for now, we're just going to press OK and get out of that. Yes, we know. So we're going to open up a terminal, and I do believe we need to type in sudo snapper create config, and I'm just going to do it for root. I do believe that's what we need to do. It's been a while. There we go. So now if we go back into our snapshot for Yast, that should now work with BTRFS snapshots. So we'll give that a go. Okay, so we're going to try and create a snapshot. So what we're going to do is press create. And we're just going to leave it on the default, so I'm not too concerned about any of like the important no user data, etc. So it appears to have created a snapshot. So what we're going to do is actually test it with a rollback by installing timeshift and then going back, rolling back to see if it's now been uninstalled. So we're going to go sudo zip in timeshift. And while we're actually installing and opening up timeshift, we can see if it's set up to work with that as well for your BTRFS file system. Okay, let's open it up from KRunner. So we're going to open up timeshift here. It's going to ask us for our root password. Okay, so there's something missing for timeshift to work, which is cron tab. So what we're going to do is go back into our terminal and type in sudo zipper in cron. Interesting that it's not including any of these things that make using BTRFS more user friendly. I would have thought that at least the config for snapper would have been set up out of the box. So let's close that once more and then close that again. And now we're going to reopen timeshift and see if that's taken care of all we needed to do there for the cron tab. So let's open it back up. And there we go. So it's defaulted to BTRFS. So it appears that the subvolumes are set up to work. So let's go next, next, finish. And there we go. So that appears to have worked there as well with timeshift for your snapshots. So now what we're going to do to actually make sure that the snapper config has worked is now try and roll back to before we actually installed snapshot timeshift and see if that removes it without any issues. So now we're going to go back into snapper, type in our password. So let's just close this one off for the moment. Okay, so it's also made us some additional snapshots there, but we're going to go straight back to this very first one here. So what we're going to do is press show changes. And I'm just going to select everything. So for etc, root, user and var. So let's scroll down. And now we're going to do the same for root, USR and var. So that, if all goes to plan and the snapshot says work, should remove cron, which I can see right there. And I can also see time shift. So it appears that it's all working. So let's press restore selected. And yes. Okay, so that's now complete. So for that to have worked, we should no longer have timeshift installed and in our application launcher, which we don't. So all we had to do there for actual snapper to work with BTRFS is just to create the config, which is pretty easy going. So it does appear that we can also use timeshift as well. But for openSUSE, I would recommend just using YaST snapshot tool. Now, speaking of YaST, we've just opened up the control center, which you can kind of think of as like your one-stop destination for configuring parts of your system. So as you can see there, we can do a media check, and then just beneath that we have software management, and we can also go into the software repositories. So what we're going to do is test this out by installing a couple of applications. So using the search bar at the top left, we're just going to go for Flatpak, because I don't think that's installed out of the box on GeckoLinux. It is not. So we're going to install that, and it's a batch install, so you can choose as much as you want, press accept, and then go through the installation. And it's also go ahead and get GIMP. In fact, yeah, we will get GIMP, and then we'll also get Kdenlive to edit today's video. And I think we'll leave it at that. So again, we're going to press enter for Kdenlive, and we're going to right click, install, and now we're going to press accept, and that's going to go through all of the sort of process to install those packages for us. Okay, so that's now complete, and it only took us 43 seconds to install those applications. So let's just make sure they're appearing right where they should be, and there we go. So I think what I'm going to do now is add the FlatHub repository for Flatpak, install a couple of Flatpak applications, and then we'll test a few more things out, and then we'll test out hibernation and make sure that's all working properly. Right, so we've also gone ahead and added the FlatHub repository and used that to install a Flatpak version of Chromium, which appears to be working and is in our application launcher without any issues whatsoever. Now we're going to go back into the YaST control center and check out a couple more things. So as you can see on the left hand side here, we have a few categories, which are software, hardware, system, network services, security and users, support and miscellaneous. We're going to spend a little bit of time showing you how the sort of users and group manages, because this is another thing that YaST makes a whole lot easier. So what we're going to do, I've installed the VirtualBox application. And again, another cool thing about openSUSE is that when you open it, it's going to tell you exactly how to do it. So as you can see here, you are not a member of the VBox users group. Please add yourself to this group before starting VirtualBox. You can do it using YaST security and users user group management. So that's what's very cool. So it makes life a whole lot easier, especially for a new user. So what we're going to do is we're just going to move that right up there so we can just glance at it if we need to. So we're now going to go into security and users and go to user and group management. So we'll just let that load it all up for a second. And there we go. So we can see that the current groups we are in are all right here. So we're going to click edit on our name right there and go into details. And then as you can see, we have some additional groups here, and then we can just check these boxes to then add ourselves to those groups. So we want the VBox users. So we're going to scroll all the way down till we get to V. We're going to enable that, and then we're going to log out and log back in, and hopefully we should now be able to launch VirtualBox without any issues whatsoever. So we're back at our desktop, so we're going to open up KRunner, type in VirtualBox, and it should just launch it now that we are in the VBox users group. And there we go, absolutely perfect, no issues there, very easy and user friendly. And of course, you're not limited to just what I've shown you in YaST. There's so much you can do. As I said, if you just type in YaST, you can see all of the different things like configuring your firewall, partitioning, and all of that good stuff. Now we're going to wrap up by just showing you how the language installer works for GeckoLinux. So for any additional languages you might need, that's going to go ahead and then refresh your repositories and then grab everything that you need. So as you can see there, that's now going to go ahead and grab all of these different languages available with additional 140 MB in size. And there we go. So all of our languages have now been installed without any issues whatsoever. Now personally, I'm not a huge fan of the out-of-the-box look and feel of their KDE implementation. But one of the great things about KDE is just how easy it is to customize the look and feel for exactly what you want. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a few different themes and get this set up for how I like to use my daily drivers, and then we'll test out hibernation. Okay, so I've set up my KDE desktop for how I like to use it. We've moved our panel to the top and removed the icons only task manager and replaced it with latte dock at the bottom. And we now also have a global menu for applications that support it. Now what we're going to do is test out hibernation. So we're going to leave Dolphin open, and we're also going to leave Firefox open. And when we go into hibernation, for it to work, all of these applications need to still be here in the same position when we start back up from hibernation. So we can do it a GUI way, so we can click right here, go to shutdown, and then we'll have the option here to hibernate. And now we're just starting back up. And now it's brought us to our lock screen, which means hibernation has probably worked. And there we go. So as we can see, hibernation has worked absolutely flawlessly on GeckoLinux, which is a big improvement from the last time I checked it out, where it took almost forever and it was kind of touch and go of whether it was actually going to resume from hibernation. Right, so I think that is where I'm going to wrap up with my refresh look of GeckoLinux, in particular the rolling edition featuring KDE. All in all, I do quite like it. There's some things that I like and there's some things that I don't like. I like the fact that it's now using BTRFS as its default file system. I don't like the fact that it didn't have the snapper config created out of the box, especially for a new user to get all the benefits that switching over to BTRFS on openSUSE based distributions does have to offer. However, I'm always one that switches over to the Pacman repos on a fresh install of openSUSE, so that does make things a bit easier when you choose to use GeckoLinux. I'll leave a link to this in the description below for those of you who like to give it a go yourself, and over the next day or so we're going to be testing out the new version of openSUSE Leap 15.3, so get subscribed for that. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, and if you've really enjoyed it, you can support me on Patreon. Join the Discord, there's a link in the description below. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.